I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility, not perfect men, but disciplined ones, men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. See, there's a really dangerous kind of man out there. There's a type of man more dangerous than I would argue than the ignorant man. More dangerous than one who's even weak and one who might be undisciplined. It's the man who actually knows the truth but doesn't live it. Because knowledge, it creates the illusion of alignment, but illusion, it doesn't hold under pressure. So let's think about this for a second. I'm going to set this up. There was a king in the Bible who was given literally everything. I'm talking about Solomon. Solomon, he starts with something that no other king had. It's clarity. See, when God asks him what he wants, Solomon, he didn't ask for power. He doesn't ask for wealth. He asks for wisdom, and God gives it to him in abundance, exceeding abundance. So let's, take a step back for a second and talk about the kind of man who sees things clearly. Like, just imagine that for a moment. Imagine if you're a man out there in your life and you literally see everything. You have understanding of people, decisions, consequences, the truth. There is no confusion. There's no guessing, just clarity. You know what's right and what's wrong. That was Solomon. And because of that, he becomes unmatched. His wisdom was real. Scripture says kings from all over the world came to hear him speak. Okay, he wasn't just respected, he was recognized globally. His kingdom, it flourished. Wealth increased in abundance. Peace expanded. Everything was working. And that's where it begins. Because just like Uzziah, success introduces a new kind of problem. And it's not an external one. It is internal. Because you begin to trust your own understanding. And that's what the subtle shift is. Okay, Solomon, he didn't just wake up one morning and reject God. He drifted gradually, quietly. And here's how it started. Okay, because he started to allow things into his life that God had already warned against. And this is where we need to take a step back and talk about the soul compromise that we all face as men day to day, because this is how it happens. You don't make one massive decision. You make small little allowances. You say to yourself, this isn't that serious, or it won't really affect me, or, I can handle this. And over time, those small allowances, they reshape you. So let's talk about the influence that changed him. Okay, Solomon, he married foreign women, and scripture is clear. They turned his heart away, and he went after other gods. Not immediately, just over the course of time. And that's how influence works. It doesn't always hit you all at once. It wears on you. The knowledge he had, it didn't protect him. And that's the part that most men miss here. Solomon, he knew better, right? He was the wisest man on earth. He had more wisdom than anybody. He understood the truth deeply, and yet he still drifted. Why? Well, because knowing the truth is not the same as actually obeying it. So, as men, we can know things, or maybe there's even someone in your life where they know what the right thing is, but they don't act on it. I'm sure you've probably felt this before in your own life. You know what you should be doing, you know what's right, you know what needs to change, and yet you don't move. Not because you don't understand, but just simply because you don't act. Okay, and that's where this most dangerous gap comes up, because this kind of gap, it destroys a lot of men. And this is the gap between what they know and what they live. And the wider that gap becomes, the more unstable they become. See, Solomon, he built an amazing kingdom, no doubt about it. But he also compromised. And here's the contradiction, okay? Because Solomon, he built the temple, this place of worship, center of alignment. And yet at the same time, he built altars to other gods. Think about that for a second. He maintained the truth publicly while compromising himself privately. And that's where most men live. Not fully aligned, not fully off, just kind of divided. One foot in truth, one foot in compromise. And that tension, it eventually breaks something. God doesn't ignore this. God actually confronts Solomon, not vaguely, but very, very directly. And he tells him, because of this, the kingdom will be torn from you. There is a cost when it comes to drifting. Solomon, he didn't lose everything immediately, but the damage was already set in motion. The kingdom would divide, as we see later on in the story. The foundation he had would fracture. Because leadership, it always multiplies. What you allow spreads. So let's go ahead and talk about the men in life who realizes it's too late. There's a moment that most men have, and again, you've probably seen one in your own life, where a man, he looks back and he sees it. He says, I knew, I saw it, I didn't act on it. And that realization hits harder than ignorance ever really could, because he wasn't blind, he just chose not to move. Wisdom without discipline is dangerous. Okay, Solomon, he proves something most men don't want to accept. Wisdom alone is not enough. Understanding alone is not enough. You can know literally everything and still fall if you don't live it. Let's talk about a modern contrast for a second, which is where you're content without change. See, today, men, they consume more wisdom than ever before. Podcasts, clips, books, messages. They know that discipline matters, that alignment matters, truth matters, and yet nothing changes, because there has been this consumption that has replaced obedience, which is this illusion of growth. Learning, it feels like progress, but if it doesn't lead to action, it's not growth, it's just delay. So here's what the real question is, because the real question is not, do you understand anymore? The question is, are you living it? Solomon, he had everything: wisdom, wealth, power, clarity, and still he drifted. Okay, so don't confuse knowing with becoming. Don't confuse understanding with obedience, because the man who knows the truth and doesn't live it is closer to falling than the man who is still learning. You don't need more knowledge, okay? You need to live with what you already know.